no matter what you hear about agencies, clients saying they don't want to beat their agencies up anymore, they're doing more and more on price now and not on performance. And I think that's a real challenge. So for us, it's very hard. Is this helping? Yeah, perfect. Good. It's very hard for an agency to go license technology that's not going to pass right through to the client. And so what we found is that the clients, because they know that their agency relationships they're tending to keep short term, are probably the biggest proponents of having technology themselves. They've realized that shared data management platforms are not in their best interests. Many of them view, certainly with TV, that the CRM, the customer relationship management software, is the new DMP. That's where we do all of our matching at the name and address level. I mean, they realize cookies are not a very durable way to have identification. And so I think what's happening, and this is a big trend, as I say, I'm sure it's different market by market, but I think the big trend that is going on are that the principals in the transaction are now taking a bigger stake in the transaction, which are the companies that are actually spending the money, the client, and the consumers. And that's also going to be a really big factor, I think, when we see with what both Safari and Google are doing on the browser front with control of tracking. Obviously, with the laws in Europe now, that's going to have a really big impact.
And will we ever get to the point where making a TV buy is just as easy, technologically just as easy as making a digital buy, in terms of being able to jump on a DSP, be able to make your buy in real time and choose whatever inventory is available? Or, you know, we had a number of companies here last year from the US who are heavily involved in the programmatic TV space, and yet they weren't able to come because they're at the upfronts. They're doing their upfronts at the moment. So the nature of TV production, and they often need the money upfront to fund the following season's content. Will there always be an upfront dimension to TV advertising?
In the US, yes. But I am going to absolutely take issue with your opening line of the question, which is, when will TV be as easy to buy as digital? Anybody that has bought television in the United States and bought digital would argue that television is 100 times easier. The 6 people I mentioned will deploy $20 billion of spend across what will be tens of thousands of campaigns, and they're making those decisions over lunches, over handshakes, and over phone calls. And while we may find that archaic, it's actually extraordinarily efficient. So I've had digital companies with hundreds of traffickers running barely $100 million businesses. I have 4 traffickers today. And I could do it with 2, but we added software later. It's TV. I mean, you make a phone call, you've got a deal. You don't have to pass a bunch of insertion orders and get a bunch of sign-offs. You don't have to reconcile a bunch of spreadsheets from a bunch of different ad servers. You've got a well-known and accepted third-party currency that tells you what numbers you have. If you have a problem, 2 people jump on the phone and they solve a $100 million problem in 5 minutes. There are advantages to the industry being tight and close and being able to do that. Now, as I say, it's seen as archaic. I actually think one of the challenges have been a lot of what people have promoted as programmatic TV was a solution in search of a problem that certainly did not exist in the United States. In the United States, there'll be an upfront because demand exceeds supply. Simple. You have been reading stories about big advertisers stepping out of the TV market in the US for years, haven't you? It's always a headline. How come rates go up and total volume of sales go up every year? Because for everyone that steps out, there's 3 behind. And the digital companies are really stepping in. I mean, we had, if you look at companies like Dollar Shave Club and Zillow and Casper, a mattress company, Peloton, a bike company. There's the digital companies are actually coming in aggressively. And so I think one of the problems that happened in the programmatic TV world was they thought that the big problem TV had was an automated process. It lacked that. It doesn't lack that. Actually, Google TV ads tried that years ago and there was no need for it. It doesn't have a process problem, it has a product problem. TV audiences have been fragmenting massively on more and more channels, more and more day parts, obviously more and more devices. And so you can't just buy it on a content basis. you'll still want to buy some of it on a content basis, but you can't buy all of it on a content basis because you're going to buy a lot of frequency against the same people, and you're going to buy a lot of waste. And so I think that if you look at what has been called advanced TV, there's sort of three buckets. There's the pure addressable, and that's on a constant march and infrastructure limited. You have what's automated, and I think the idea of automated buying isn't really interesting because if I'm a seller, if I can basically make every buyer, client, come to me, I'm not going to go to their office, by the way. They're going to come, I'm going to put them in an auditorium, I'm going to seat them next to their competitor, I'm only going to give my pitch once, and I'm going to say, buy now, or you're going to pay 30% more. And if your competitor buys enough, I'll shut you out of the market. Procter & Gamble has decided to spend more money on TV this year in the United States after shifting back to digital. Do you know what the TV networks are saying? No, we don't want your money. The world's largest advertisers are saying, no, you have legacy rates that are too low. We don't want your money. Sorry. Take it back to digital. We don't want it. You don't have a seat at the table. We will not come to Cincinnati. We're not going to have lunch with you. That's the TV market.
Just on a similar theme, when we're comparing the digital and TV sides, when you go to a digital event, people will scoff at the idea of GRPs. When you go to an online or TV event, in the UK, for example, Barb is very much sort of regarded as a world-class gold standard. Do you think we're going to see these sort of digital metrics cross over into TV, and will they be? Will it actually create more friction the more we sort of go into these sort of granular measurement systems, or are we better off sticking to something more simpler, where there's a simple trading currency that everyone understands and it allows the flow of money back and forth?
I do think it's going to get very complicated in TV. I think that's inevitable. I think the gross rating point has a problem because it's a measurement of weight. It's not a measurement of targeting, nor is it a measurement of frequency. For most markets in the world, 15 years ago, if you had a gross rating point, or its equivalent in the market, you had reach. In the United States, the amount of the relative reach versus frequency balance is about a 9x difference from 12 years ago. So, because of all of the fragmentation. So I think that when people talk about multi-channel measurement and will there be a single sort of measurement of truth, I do think we're going to see it. I think it is largely digital born. I mean, although it arguably came out of TV when it launched, which is a person impression level count when it comes to audience, and it's going to be a conversion or an ROI on performance. And I think that's how all of the media will be evaluated. And I think that a lot of the proxy metrics will go away. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be set by third-party bodies. I don't think the third-party bodies will have nearly as much influence in the future. I mean, I was one of the founders of the IAB. I was on the very first digital currency standards and multiple committees. We did not pass a standard IAB impression, I think, until 2004, and we've been selling them for 9 years. And then, guess what? Not one of the big players sells against that today. So the IAB standard impression is not used for 75% of the deliveries. But yet people buy. Why do they buy? Because it works and it solves their own metrics. So I think we're much more going to see marketer-driven metrics, proprietary metrics. As I would say Reno Scanzoni would tell you today he is buying on the basis of models where he's not telling the seller what he's buying on. He's buying on their currency, but he has his own currency in mind, not unlike stock traders.
One of the themes that we're going to come up tomorrow is how we can use blockchain in TV advertising. I know there's quite a few blockchain skeptics out there who still aren't fully sure of how it can be applied. I mean, do you see any possibility for how it's going to be used in TV advertising or how it could be applied?
Yes, my view, and I'm fortunate that one of my investors, Union Square Ventures in New York, are very heavy investors in blockchain companies and have been for probably 6 or 7 years. So I don't know that much about it, but I've spent a lot of time around companies. And I think that asking whether we would use it is sort of like asking, would we use electricity? So to me, blockchain is a really extraordinary technology and a capacity to be able to do very, very difficult computations in a massively scaled, very fast way that you can verify. And you can do it in ways that is transparent to the verification, but can be made essentially opaque or anonymized as to the data. So for example, there is, certainly in the US, in the digital video world, there's a massive problem with bots, fraud, and non-viewable ads. Well, bots and proxy servers will will make it look like they're making deliveries. It is impossible for you to go in and grab all of the logs of all the video ad servers and all of the proxy hops from the major players and then actually sit down with one machine and try to evaluate how many actual machines were alive or people were alive making calls at this moment, and how many seem to be coming from the same browsers or the same codes or the same IP addresses or the same proxies. You couldn't do it. You would have, many, many, many trillions and trillions and trillions of transactions, certainly more, not even just atoms, quarks than there are in the known universe. But in the blockchain, you could have all of that data. You could come up with an instruction set to have it parceled and compartmentalized and distributed and then re-verified just to see how many different IPs were involved. And what you would find out, not unlike what you would do in the old-fashioned world with an auditing firm, they'd come out after looking at all of your accounting ledgers and say, isn't this funny? This same person seems to have submitted this same expense 12 times for the same lunch on the same day. Well, that's what you would find. Blockchain is a unique technology that you could suck in the logs of all of the major ad servers, or just a group of them, and you would immediately dedupe and find out, for example, how much fraud is in the system. This is one area I know the Association of National Advertisers in the US is looking at, because if you've got, so I think it's going to be a very significant technology. I think that, certainly anyone in the banking industry knows, and this isn't a Coinbase issue, not Coinbase, but Bitcoin or companies like Coinbase, just what they're looking at managing the back end in banks. If banks are not shifting over their back end reconciliation to blockchain so that it's their primary way of reconciling in a year, in like a year to 5 years, they're going to fall well behind the market just because of the cost difference.
Over the last couple of years, we've seen, the consultancies like Accenture and Deloitte increasingly sort of encroaching on agency space. Often to rip agencies apart for a fee, and often sometimes they're actually showing up in pitches and behaving very much like agencies themselves. Is this something you're seeing in the US? And again, is this something we're seeing on the TV side of the industry?
We are seeing it in the US. We're not seeing it as much in TV yet. But certainly it's heavy in digital, and that we've seen purchases of creative shops. I think the big challenges for those large consultancies are they're very used to, certainly when there's technology involved on the IT sides, they're very used to having contracts that are 10-year contracts with commits of not just, $5 million would be a tiny commit. It would be $25 million a year, and that's not full-time equivalent prices added. That's real premium pricing, and I don't think that there's many clients that are ready to step up with that kind of money. The sell side does. Like the people selling like OpenAP, which is a new consortium of basically audience-based advertising in TV in the US, Fox, Turner, and Viacom. Accenture's building the back end. So I'm sure that's going to be a really big long-term contract. I actually just don't think that we have that many clients, marketers, that are actually going to be allowed to command an IT services budget to make those kind of acquisitions. And it's unfortunate, but most cases they're only really able to get credibility in their shop to buy 30,000 a head people at a 20% premium on the full-time equivalent basis. I think it's going to be really hard to expect them. But I do think Deloitte, Accenture, I think it'll be interesting to watch what happens with IBM and Watson, and now they own Weather Channel, the players here. We will see them. I don't know how they'll attack the market. I do not think they're going to attack the market just like an agency attacks the market. That would be foolish. I don't think that's the last thing they want to do is go into these getting jammed contracts. I mean, for example, I don't think when Procter & Gamble put the review in Europe, there were any consultancies involved. And actually, it's a bit hypocritical, and if you don't mind, it's not the cider either. I just think it's really, really hypocritical to have the chief marketing officer of Procter & Gamble say that it's about quality and it's not about price. And he awards a contract to Omnicom in North America, which was, from everything I heard, working really well. And then when it came for Europe, he had them compete and basically drop a really low price and then stick the incumbents with a low price. So in that kind of mindset, it's going to be really hard for premium consulting services to be able to enter in the tactical media world.
You mentioned that earlier about there being 6 people who control TV in the US. And I think certainly in Europe, I know when you're organizing an event like this, there's very few identifiable I am responsible for addressable TV people. But we've got lots of people on the fringes and lots of people interested and lots of people from the programmatic side who are quite gung-ho and keen to become more involved in the TV side. If you give one piece of advice to an advertiser or agency who wants to get going with addressable TV, what would it be?
Focus on results, not costs. I think that's just the biggest challenge. You've really got to be able to give the marketing organizations the capacity to make decisions based on the results of the ads and not the cost of the ads. Not just the cost of the ads, but the cost of executing the ads, and then looking at it at scale. And I think that's been the challenge that we've seen across a lot of advertising, have been the pressure at the client side to drive down price of media on a cost basis and drive down the price of acquiring that, and not looking at necessarily the results. I will say the one thing, which is one of the things which I'm excited, which has a very European element to it, that I think is very exciting about what's going to propel addressable faster in the US in the next number of years, is Altice. I mean, they bought cable operator number 6, I guess, or 5 or 6 in the US, and number 10, and are now rumored to be amassing a war chest to go after one of the big ones. And everything I'm hearing, and one of the ones they bought was very advanced Cablevision, very advanced and addressable in the US. I also know Portugal Telecom, which they bought down the coast, also is very advanced and addressable, and they've done a lot of stuff in France. So I think actually Altice and the way they think and the way they operate actually could accelerate the market a lot. But you all could probably tell me a little bit more about how Altice operates.